When my uncle sent me that video, I never expected my entire reality to shift. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted and ready to settle into my usual evening routine when my phone buzzed. Uncle Ray. That was odd. We talked, sure, but he wasn't the type to send random messages, especially not with the words, "You need to see this, Allie." I'm sorry. Curious and slightly uneasy, I clicked on the video. And in that moment, my world tilted on its axis. There she was, my sister Amber, lounging in a chair, drink in hand, a smug grin stretched across her face. The setting was familiar. My parents' backyard, their usual weekend barbecue. She looked relaxed, carefree, completely oblivious to the camera recording her. "I mean, come on," she scoffed, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Ollie's too dumb to ever kick me out. She just lets me stay there rent-free like an idiot." Laughter erupted, not just hers but others too. Our cousin Matt. Her friend Lindsay. Even Dad chuckled. Amber shook her head with exaggerated pity. "She actually thinks I'm struggling," she continued, mocking me. "Like poor little me can't afford my own place. Please. I make way more than she even knows. But why would I waste my money when my idiot sister lets me live for free?" My stomach twisted. I replayed it once. Twice. 3 times. Each time her words cut deeper. Asterisk, too dumb to ever kick me out. Asterisk, an idiot. Wasting my money. I felt frozen, the air thick and suffocating around me. For 3 years, Amber had been living in my house. My house. When she first moved in, it was out of necessity, or so I thought. She had just gone through a rough breakup, lost her apartment, and called me in tears. "I just need a little time, Allie," she had pleaded. "I swear I'll get back on my feet soon." And like the fool she took me for, I believed her. I opened my doors, asked for no rent, no bills, just a place for her to stay while she figured things out. And now here she was, laughing at my kindness. I should have been shaking with rage. But instead I felt something else. Something colder. A strange, eerie calm. Uncle Ray's message popped up again. "I wasn't sure if I should send this, but you needed to know." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The old me, the one who always gave Amber the benefit of the doubt, wanted to ask for context, to give her a chance to explain. But the new me, the one who had just been slapped in the face with the truth, typed something different. "Thank you. Don't say anything to her. I'll handle it." And I would. I didn't confront her. I didn't call her out. I didn't storm into her room demanding an explanation. Oh, that would have been too easy for her. Instead, the next morning I smiled at her over breakfast just like I always did. I asked about work, feigned interest in her stories, laughed at her jokes. And when next month's rent came due, the rent she had never once been asked to pay, everything would change. She had no idea what was coming. The morning after watching the video, I stood in the kitchen, calmly stirring my coffee as Amber strolled in, completely unaware that I knew the truth. "Morning," she yawned, stretching her arms dramatically. "Damn, I slept like a baby last night. That guest bed of yours is way too comfortable." I smiled. Glad to hear it. She had no idea. No clue that I had spent the entire night making plans. Amber moved around the kitchen like she owned the place, grabbing the last of my oat milk, pouring herself coffee, humming to herself. 3 years of this. 3 years of me making space for her. Letting her take without question, without gratitude. She slid into a chair and sighed, rubbing her temples. Ugh. Work is insane right now. I just sipped my coffee. She had no idea her free ride was about to end. I swear if my boss emails me one more time about those reports, I might actually lose it. Amber sighed dramatically, rubbing her temples as she scrolled through her phone. I nodded, pretending to listen, but my mind was elsewhere, stuck on the words from that video. I make way more than she even knows. He had a good job. A stable income. She had the means to move out whenever she wanted. And yet she had been lying to my face, pretending to struggle, milking my generosity for everything it was worth. That meant there was no reason. No excuse. She shouldn't still be living here. I took a slow sip of my coffee. So, what are your plans this month? I asked casually. Amber frowned. What do you mean? Oh, you know. I shrugged. You've been here for a while now. I figured you might be thinking about your next steps. Looking for a new place, maybe? She let out a groan, flopping back in her chair. Ugh, Ally, I have so much on my plate right now. Moving is the last thing I need to deal with. Plus, it's so expensive. Expensive. I fought the urge to laugh. She could afford it, clearly, but I kept my expression neutral. I get that, I said. But, I was thinking, maybe it's time for some changes around here. Amber barely looked up from her phone. What kind of changes? I let the silence stretch just long enough for tension to creep in. Then, in the same casual tone, I said, well, starting next month, I think it makes sense for you to start paying rent. Amber froze. Just for a second. Then she let out a breathy laugh. Wait. Are you serious? I tilted my head. Yeah. I mean, you've been here 3 years, Amber. Rent-free. I figured it was time. She scoffed. Come on, Ally. We're family. You really expect me to pay rent? I held my coffee cup just beneath my lips, watching her. Yes. The word landed like a slap. Amber leaned back in her chair, her face twisting into something between amusement and disbelief. Wow. I mean, I just wasn't expecting you to pull something like this. Something like this. I had let her stay here out of kindness. Out of love. And she had laughed at me behind my back, called me a fool. And now she was acting like I was the one being unfair. I forced a light chuckle. It's not really a big deal, Amber. Just basic rent. Nothing crazy. I thought maybe $1,200 a month would be fair. Amber's jaw dropped. $1,200. That's insane. I raised an eyebrow. Not really. It's actually below market rate for this area. You're getting a steal, honestly. She shook her head, setting down her coffee with a sharp clink. Are you seriously doing this to me? After everything. Everything. I nearly asked her what exactly she thought she had done for me. But instead I just smiled and stood up, taking my coffee cup to the sink. I figured I'd give you a heads up now, I said, rinsing my mug. So you have plenty of time to get your finances in order. Amber stared at me, her mouth slightly open like she was about to argue. But she didn't. She just sat there, blinking as if she couldn't quite process what was happening. And that's when I knew. She thought I'd cave. She thought I'd feel guilty. Backtrack. Tell her I was just joking. She had no idea that the real storm was still coming. For the next few days, Amber avoided me. Normally, she was everywhere, sprawled across my couch, blasting Netflix late into the night, leaving dishes in the sink like she expected me to clean up after her. But after our conversation about rent, she became scarce. She barely spoke to me. When we did cross paths, her responses were clipped, short. And yet, I could feel the anger radiating off her, simmering just beneath the surface. She wasn't used to this. She wasn't used to being told no. I had been too accommodating for too long. And now, with just one small shift in the dynamic, she was already showing signs of cracking. Good. I wanted her to feel it. The discomfort. The tension. The realization that she was no longer in control. He thought I was stupid. She thought she had me wrapped around her little finger. She was about to learn just how wrong she was. It was Friday night when Amber finally decided to confront me. I was curled up on the couch with a book, enjoying the quiet, when she stormed into the living room. No warning. No pretense of small talk. Just raw, unfiltered irritation. So, she said, arms crossed, eyes sharp with disbelief. Are you really serious about this rent thing? I looked up from my book, completely unfazed. Yeah. Why wouldn't I be? Amber scoffed, pacing back and forth. I just don't get why you're doing this now. After 3 years. It makes no sense. I set my book down, meeting her gaze. Because it's time, Amber. You have a job. You make good money. There's no reason you shouldn't be contributing. Her lips curled in frustration. We're family, Ally. Family helps each other. You're really going to start treating me like some random tenant? I didn't flinch. You're living here like a tenant. Why shouldn't you pay like one? Amber's nostrils flared. I could see the gears in her head turning, scrambling for a way to twist the situation in her favor. Then, just like clockwork, she switched tactics. She sighed dramatically, softening her voice. Look, I know I joke around a lot. Maybe I don't always show it, but I appreciate you, okay? I've been going through a lot. But the guilt trip. Classic Amber. I tilted my head. A lot. She nodded, sighing as if the weight of the world rested on her shoulders. Work stress. Personal stuff. Life. I don't talk about it much because I don't want to burden you. I let that sit for a moment before saying, so you have the money then? Amber blinked. What? You said it's life stress, not financial. So paying rent shouldn't be an issue, right? Her face twitched just slightly before she quickly masked it. I mean, technically, yeah, I could pay it, she admitted, waving a dismissive hand. But why should I? It's not like you need the money, Ally. It's not like you're struggling. And there was. She didn't think she owed me anything. He thought my kindness was an obligation. A slow, amused smile spread across my lips. It's not about whether I need it, Amber. It's about fairness. She rolled her eyes. Oh my God, fairness? Are you serious right now? Yes. Amber let out a bitter laugh. Wow. You've really changed, huh? I kept my voice light. Maybe. Or maybe I've just opened my eyes. For just a second I saw it. The flicker of panic in her expression. She still thought she had control. But something felt different now. And she didn't like it. She inhaled sharply, shaking her head. Well, I'm not paying rent. So I guess you're gonna have to figure out what to do about that. I held her gaze. Let the silence stretch. Let her think she had the upper hand. Then I smiled. Okay. That was all I said. Just okay. And I watched as uncertainty crept into her face. She had expected me to argue, to plead, to negotiate. But I didn't need to. Because next month was coming. And she had no idea what was waiting for her. The first of the month arrived quietly. Amber, on the other hand, did not. She stomped into the kitchen that morning, acting like she didn't have a single worry in the world. She poured herself coffee, grabbed one of my expensive protein bars, one of many little luxuries she never bothered replacing, and flopped onto the couch, scrolling through her phone like she always did. She was relaxed. Smug even. Because she thought I had backed down. She thought my little rent talk had just been a bluff. A moment of frustration I'd eventually let go of. She thought she'd won. She hadn't. And she was about to find out. At exactly 9 a.m. Amber's phone buzzed. From across the room I watched as she frowned at the screen, tapped a few times, then suddenly sat up straighter. What the hell? She muttered. She turned her phone toward me, eyebrows raised. Ally, I just got an email from your rental management company. What the hell is this? I set my coffee down calmly. Oh, that. I said. That's your lease agreement. Her mouth fell open. Pie what? Lease agreement, I repeated like it was the most normal thing in the world. Since you said you weren't paying rent, I decided to formalize everything. That email is your rental contract with the property management company I hired. Amber blinked. She looked at the email again, scrolling frantically. This says my first rent payment is due today. That's right, I nodded. I figured I'd make it official. Her head snapped up. You're actually serious? As a heart attack. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Oh my God. You're insane. Her expression softened, and for the first time, I saw something close to vulnerability flicker across her face. Ally, she sighed, her voice lower now, almost pleading. I know I've made mistakes. I know I haven't been the best sister, but this is extreme. Can we just talk about this? Really talk. I met her gaze, unblinking. That's what I've been trying to do. But every time you either argue, deflect, or run away. So forgive me if I don't think this conversation will be any different. She swallowed, shifting her weight. I just need a little time. You've had time, Amber. 3 years of it. Her jaw tightened. It's not that simple. It is, though. I stood, keeping my voice calm but firm. You keep acting like I blindsided you, but I gave you notice. I gave you options. You made your choice when you walked out that door. Her hands clenched into fists. I needed time. No, I corrected. You needed an excuse. Her nostrils flared, but she had no comeback. She knew I was right. I let the silence settle between us, watching the emotions war on her face. Anger, resentment, desperation. Then, as expected, she switched tactics again. Her shoulders sagged. Her eyes went glassy. I don't have anywhere else to go. I arched a brow. Now you don't. Her lip quivered. I'm serious, ally. I don't know what I'm going to do. You should have thought about that before you decided my kindness was an obligation instead of a gift. Her breathing grew uneven, frustration morphing into something else. Something dangerously close to fear. You're really going to kick me out? I'm not kicking you out, Amber. I gave you a choice. You chose not to pay. Actions have consequences. A beat of silence. Then she let out a bitter laugh. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She accused, shaking her head. Seeing me squirm, finally having the upper hand. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. This is why I stopped feeling bad for you. You never take responsibility. Not once. It's always someone else's fault, someone else's problem. You think this is fun for me? Watching my own sister manipulate and guilt-trip her way out of accountability. She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. I exhaled. Look, Amber. I'm done arguing. You can sign the lease and pay rent, or you can leave. That's it. Those are your options. She stared at me, breathing hard, her mind racing again. Then she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. But not a bitter, angry laugh. No. This one was different, resigned, almost amused. You know what? She said, shaking her head. Fine. You win. I'll move out. I studied her carefully, waiting for the inevitable follow-up. But don't expect me to forgive you for this, she added, grabbing her purse. You're supposed to be my sister, not my damn landlord. I held her gaze, unfazed. Then maybe you should have treated me like a sister instead of a free ride. She scoffed but didn't argue. Instead, she turned and stormed off to her room. I heard drawers slamming, bags being shoved around. And for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. Because this time, Amber wasn't running from her problems. She was running from consequences. And that wasn't my problem anymore. I saw something in her eyes, something I'd never seen before. Fear. Real, undeniable fear. Look, she said, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant. I messed up, okay? I shouldn't have said those things. I was just venting. I didn't mean any of it. I didn't even blink. Yes, you did. Amber hesitated. No, You called me an idiot, I cut in, my voice firm. You laughed about how I was too stupid to ever kick you out. You bragged about playing me like a fool. She swallowed hard and looked away. I heard it, Amber, I continued, unrelenting. I watched you say it. And so did Uncle Ray. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. You told him. I let out a small laugh. No, Amber. He told me. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The realization struck her like a slap. She'd been caught, exposed, and worst of all, there was no way to lie her way out of it. She exhaled sharply and started pacing again. Okay, I get it, she muttered, frustration seeping into her tone. I screwed up. I said nothing, just watching her unravel. I don't have anywhere to go, ally. She stopped, staring at me, waiting for me to break, to soften, to fix things for her like I always had. But I didn't. I picked up my laptop and pulled up an email. Actually, I said, scrolling. That's not true. Amber frowned. What? I took the liberty of looking into some affordable apartments nearby, I said, clicking on a listing. There are 3 places within 10 miles that fit your budget. I even spoke to a landlord. He's willing to waive the security deposit if you apply this week. Amber's jaw tightened. I can't believe you did that. I shrugged. Why wouldn't I? You have a job. You make good money, remember? She scoffed, shaking her head. You're actually enjoying this, aren't you? I met her gaze, my voice calm. No, Amber. But I'm done being used. She took a sharp breath, but she didn't argue because she couldn't. She knew I was right. I had given her every chance. I had been patient, kind, and more than fair. I had offered her options. But in the end she had made her choice. And now she had to live with it. Amber let out a bitter chuckle. Wow. So this is really happening. I nodded. It is. Her eyes flickered toward the hallway, toward her bedroom, the space she had treated as her own for years. But it wasn't hers. It never had been. She turned back to me, her jaw clenched. Fine, she muttered. I'll be out by the end of the week. I gave her a small, knowing smile. Good. And just like that, the power shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't the fool. I wasn't the pushover. I wasn't the idiot. I was free. Amber moved out 3 days later. She barely spoke as she packed. No snarky remarks, no passive-aggressive digs. She hardly even looked at me. And honestly, that was fine. She had spent years treating me like a joke, taking my kindness for granted. Now for the first time she had to stand on her own 2 feet. And it was long overdue. The night before she left, I found her sitting in the living room, staring at nothing. A half-empty suitcase sat beside her. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over and sat across from her. She didn't look up. For once, Amber wasn't playing a role. She wasn't acting superior or smug or manipulative. She just looked small. And maybe, just maybe, a little lost. I took a deep breath. Amber. She finally glanced at me. What? I studied her face, the exhaustion in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. I don't hate you, I said quietly. Amber snorted, shaking her head. Could have fooled me. I sighed. I wish things had been different. She frowned, looking down at her hands. Yeah, she muttered. Me too. Silence stretched between us before I finally spoke again. You know I didn't do this to hurt you. Her jaw tightened. It still feels like you did. I nodded slowly. Maybe. But think about it, Amber. If I hadn't stopped this now, when would you have left? Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't answer. Because she knew. She had been perfectly happy living off me, knowing I'd never push back. And if I hadn't seen that video, she would have kept going forever. Amber exhaled, rubbing her temples. I don't know, okay? She trailed off, shaking her head. I leaned forward slightly. You're smart, Amber. You're capable. You've had the means to take care of yourself for a long time. I held her gaze. So why didn't you? She swallowed hard. Because it was easy, she admitted. You always made it easy. I sat back, nodding. And that's exactly why I had to stop. Amber stared at me for a long moment, then finally let out a slow sigh. So this is it, huh? I gave a small smile. Looks like it. She shook her head before letting out a quiet chuckle. Guess I can't call you an idiot anymore. I smirked. No, you can't. For the first time in years, Amber and I sat together without any pretense. No manipulation. No lies. Just 2 sisters finally speaking the truth. And for once, I think she actually understood. The next morning she was gone. No dramatic exit. No screaming match. Just a packed suitcase, a closed bedroom door, and a simple text message an hour later. I'm out. Good luck, ally. I stared at the message for a long moment before locking my phone. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even relieved. I just felt done. And that was enough. A week later, I walked through my house, letting the silence wrap around me like a long overdue embrace. No more door slamming. No more missing groceries. No more walking into my own home and feeling like an outsider. It was just mine again. And I had earned that. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. When I opened it, Uncle Ray stood there with a knowing smile. "Well," he asked, "how's it feel?" I smiled. "Peaceful." He chuckled. "I bet." I stepped aside, letting him in. He glanced around the house, nodding in approval. "Looks better already." I laughed. "I think so too." Ray turned to me, his expression softening. "I know that wasn't easy, kid. But you did the right thing." I sighed, leaning against the counter. "Then why does it still feel weird?" Ray folded his arms. "Because she's your sister." I nodded. "But that doesn't mean she was good for you," he continued. "And it damn sure doesn't mean you had to keep letting her use you." I looked down, letting his words sink in. Then after a moment I met his gaze. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Ray let out a slow breath. "She'll have to be." And deep down I knew he was right. Amber had been forced to grow up, forced to take responsibility, maybe for the first time in her life. Whether she liked it or not, she couldn't rely on me anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was the best thing that could have happened to her. That night, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine, staring out the window at the quiet street beyond. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt something I hadn't even realized I was missing. Freedom. I had spent years letting someone else take up space in my life, in my home, in my peace. I had given and given and given, only to receive manipulation in return. But now I was free. I smiled, taking a slow sip of my wine. Amber had laughed about playing me for a fool. She had underestimated me. And now she was learning the hard way. Because I had stopped playing the fool.